All right, EJ, at long last, we are finally here. It is Bengals Day here on the season preview series, team by team, division by division, 40 total episodes, and this is going to be the final, second to final one of the AFC North week. Tomorrow we kind of have our macro division preview where we take everything into account. But specifically today, we are talking Bengals, and we are talking Bengals in depth. Every single transaction that has been made since the end of last season, where they came oh so close to winning a Super Bowl until now. And a lot has happened, and believe it or not, as good as this team was to get knocking on the door of a Super Bowl victory, on paper, they're even better today. So we have a lot to go over today, but before we do, my friend, how are you? What are you drinking? How's your night?
My night's good. I've been looking forward to this one because I'm excited about where the Bengals are headed. And for that purpose, I brought a beer. Ooh, boy. This is Founders All Day IPA Session Ale. Very sippable beer because I don't want to slur while I'm talking about the Bengals. This is important stuff. And I do believe that they've gotten better. You and I both believe that and have some very positive things to say. So if you're a Bengals fan and you're here, click like, click subscribe, leave us a comment. That all helps the algorithm and helps us do more of this. But you're going to hear lots of things you like. So just pre-click like in advance. Trust me, it's okay. It'll work out.
By the way, mine tonight is Virginia Distillery Company, their port cask finish, because I am a sucker for anything finished in port casks.
You're just gonna beat me about the head and neck with that until I just stop asking for them to send
I'm
me
not
a
out
bottle.
yet. I'm not out yet. I got to keep drinking it down. I've had it for like 2 years now. I got to work on it.
That's the only thing about you being like 1,000 miles away is I don't get any.
I still got some of that loose style I'm working my way through just to piss you off. Anyway, first segment that we do for every single team, as per usual, our 2021 recap, where we take a look at what happened last season from a bird's eye view to kind of set up all the transactions we're about to talk about and all the draft picks we're about to talk about. They did finish 10-7, first in the division. It was a very scrappy AFC North. I think the difference between first and last in the division was like 2 wins, which you almost never see. But the Bengals emerged triumphant, went 5-4 at home, and then I think 4-4 on the road, if I recall correctly. I can't quite remember what their road record was off the top of my head, but in the last 5 games, they went
5-3 on the road.
5-3 on the road. Okay, so even better on the road than they were at home. How about that? Last 5 games went 3-2, so they finished somewhat strong, but then of course went on an absolutely unreal run in the playoffs, and Joey B kind of took over and taking down the Chiefs in overtime in dramatic fashion, and then going on that run and coming literally inches away from winning the Super Bowl, because if Aaron Donald did not get that sack on the last play, Jamar Chase was gone, and that would have been a game-winning touchdown. I thoroughly believe that. So this team was right there, man. They were right there. I know they only went 10-7, quote-unquote only, but Joey B in the playoffs, once he gets rolling, there's really not a whole lot you can do. So as long as they can just get to January every year, they're always going to have a shot. I think they have an even better shot of getting to January this year than they did this time last year, and I'm really excited to see what they have.
Joey B doing Joey B things. We both predicted this when he was coming out of LSU. I called him a stone cold killer more than once because if you miss him, and Aaron Donald didn't miss him, to Aaron Donald's credit, but if you miss him, he will reset and drive the dagger home. He will do it every single time. He has that mentality, and he did it at LSU. He even did it in his first year with the Bengals before he got wiped out. We saw him display that quality over and over again. He did it all year last year. Their line wasn't fixed last year, and there is no way that without his level of play at quarterback and that particular quality, they get anywhere close to the success that they had last year. And folks gonna find out like real quick because all the changes we're going to talk about are focused in their weakest areas, which they only had a couple, and they worked really, really hard and in a really, really focused way to fix just those. And the overall result is going to be really scary for the AFC. The AFC's loaded. We say it all the time. There's a lot of good teams there. Like you said, in January, you asked me to bet against Joey B, a healthy Joey B. I'm not going to do it. I didn't do it last year, right? We had to lay bets. And I was like, I'm not betting against Joe Burrow. And you're like, I don't know, it's not. I was like, nope, I'm not betting against him. Almost.
In terms of looking at the power structure at B that was responsible for drafting and developing Joe Burrow up to this point, again, another one of these very stable AFC North organizations where once you're in the family, you're in the family. You never leave. Duke Tobin, 24th year as Director of Player Personnel, which is incredible. One of the longest tenured roster builders in the entire league, if not the most tenured. I think he's up there with Mickey Loomis, I would say, because I think he even predates Belichick, now that I think about it, by like a year.
Yeah.
Zach Taylor, 4th year at head coach already. I can't remember how many coaches have gone to a Super Bowl within their first 3 years, but I can't imagine it's very many of them, so he's in elite company there. Even though I do think it was more of I think in terms of the more weighted side of the equation, it was probably the guys in the field rather than Zach Taylor, but I also think that he's gotten better in terms of game management since he first started out, so I'll take linear progression and a Super Bowl appearance in your first 3 years and call it a wash. At offensive coordinator, we got Brian Callahan, also in his 4th year, son of Bill Callahan, one of the greatest offensive line coaches and architects of the run game to ever exist. So he's got phenomenal bloodlines there. Lou Anarumo, I always mess up his last name. 4th year at DC. I think he's done an admirable job. There's been kind of a thin layer at the top, I would say, in the Bengals defense in the last few years. Like their starting 11, I feel like, has always been capable. The second layer under that, I think, has been thinner than a lot of other teams, but he's still churned out some pretty good defensive performances. So I say he's a good DC. And then Darren Simmons, 19 years coaching special teams for the Cincinnati Bengals. He is the ultimate special teams stalwart in the NFL. Been there forever and probably not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, we've said it lots of times during this series. If you get a good special teams coach, hold on to them. They're very valuable. Great structure overall. The Bengals, it needs to be said, do things differently than other teams in the NFL. They have the smallest scouting staff in the NFL. That's always been looked at as kind of a negative. They look at it as a positive internally within their organization. It's not just a cost-cutting move. They believe it grants them greater efficiency. And lots of people kind of laughed at that for many years. And now they've put together a roster that is Super Bowl worthy. This was not some fluke. Joe Burrow powered a lot of it, but he was surrounded by very good talent. And that is the sum total of that very small staff's very large efforts over a long period of time. And a lot more people are saying, like, what's good about that arrangement now? Not just, oh, it's the Bengals, they're weird. Like, hey, they're weird and it's working. The NFL is a copycat league. So lots of folks taking a much closer look or a much more serious look at the Bengals personnel structure and saying, what can we take out of that? They've done it. If anything, they were a year early. If you're talking about putting your window together in a projection, they probably, quote unquote, shouldn't have made the Super Bowl this year. But Joe B willed them there. And they added a very dynamic playmaker in Jamar Chase, and that combination carried them when they needed it, and they made it. Now, they're not the only ones. We can talk about contributions of their defense, Jesse Bates, and 2 linebackers that I liked a lot coming out, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, playing huge down the stretch. It's a lot of pieces, but it's a credit to this front office and the organization in general that their sort of lean and mean structure worked well enough to take them all the way to the Super Bowl. So that's notable.
In terms of notable assistant coaches under that top layer, a whole bunch of former players and longtime coaches. I just want to highlight one, and then I'll let you get to the rest. James Casey was one of my favorite Texans during his time in Houston. Special teams monster. You know, he was always like the third tight end on the roster, but really his main value was being a special teams demon. And then after his playing career wrapped up, I believe he was on that Denver team that won the Super Bowl in like 2015, and then he left to go be a tight ends coach at Houston, and then he's been the tight ends coach under Zach Taylor since Taylor got there. I just want to highlight him for myself just because he was like one of the fan favorite Texans from that era, just because he only got like 10 snaps a game, but it was just 10 snaps of fire and fury, and I love James Casey. I'm always going to love James Casey.
I knew he'd tick off your radar as a former Texan. My favorite thing about James Casey is that he didn't go straight to college. He got drafted by the White Sox as a pitcher and spent 3 years in their organization and then decided, baseball's not my thing. Went back to college at Rice, became a tight end, ended up getting drafted by the Texans. Onward and sideways, I guess, at that point. But he's ultimate tough guy, played a very tough role, was a fan favorite there for people that knew football and knew what his role was and watched his contributions. Other notable coaches on offense for the Bengals: Frank Pollock, the offensive line coach and run game coordinator, former NFL guard himself, 9 years with the 49ers, all 9. Troy Walters, this was one that popped up. I remember scouting Troy Walters at Stanford. He's their wide receivers coach, so he has a very talented group to work with. Former NFL wide receiver himself with the Vikings, Colts, Cards, and Lions. And then Brad Cragthorpe, the assistant wide receivers coach. Notable because of those family connections. We talked about bloodline connections with Callahans. Brad Cragthorpe's dad was the head coach at both Tulsa and Louisville. And not to be outdone, his granddad was the head coach at South Dakota State, Idaho State, and Oregon State. So he has a thing for states.
We can't go an episode without a South Dakota State reference, can we?
No, not recently at least. But so always fun to see that, hey, coaching is the family business, right? We got grandfather, father, and son all coaching at very high levels. On the defense and special teams side, Mark Duffner, senior defensive assistant, one of those more vague titles, started his coaching career under Woody Hayes at Ohio. So that goes back a little bit. Was the head coach at Maryland, also coached linebackers with the Bengals, Packers, Jags, Dolphins, and Bucks before getting his current role as a senior defensive assistant with the Bengals. Marion Hobby, the defensive line coach, was a former All-SEC defensive end at Tennessee and also was drafted into the NFL, so he's a defensive end there with the Vikes and Pats. Jordan Kovacs is the assistant linebackers coach for Cincinnati. He's a former NFL safety with the Dolphins. They really like safeties because Colt Anderson, their assistant special teams coach, is also a former NFL safety with the Eagles, Colts, and Bills. So not the largest staff, but in terms of experience, especially from the playing side, I'd say it leans fairly heavily to that side.
Yeah, it's a lean and mean program in a whole lot of different ways, but can't really argue with the results at this point. I mean, when you have an elite quarterback and you're making Super Bowl runs and you're doing so without spending a whole lot of money, relatively speaking, compared to a lot of other teams, it means you're doing something right. So I can't argue with the results.
Nope.
And especially under the previous regime, like they were still pretty competitive and fielding pretty good rosters there, even in the Andy Dalton era too. So, yeah, this is not the first time the Bengals have been a good team, and they just continuously do it without spending a whole lot of money. It's pretty crazy. Now, speaking of spending money, let's get into the free agency portion, because this is really where most of the improvement over last year and why we still think they're a Super Bowl contender comes from. Larry Ogunjobi obviously was allowed to walk, went to the Bears, then got rejected because of a failed physical, and now he's on the Steelers. Not entirely sure what the medical issue was that caused him to not go to Chicago, but either way... Foot. Is that what it was? Like a Liz Frank?
I don't know what specific issue with his foot, but I know that Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, he was the primary target for them in free agency, not just on the defensive line. He was their sort of not day one, but first signing, was a real key. As you know, Eberflus's defense needs a penetrating 3-tech, and they had laser focused on Ogunjobi. Ryan Poles said it broke his heart when he had to sit down with Ogunjobi and say, look, we can't offer you a contract because our medical staff won't pass you. He was highly disappointed. They pivoted very quickly to another 3-tech, but it was not Ogunjobi. There was some thought that he would do exactly what he did, go away, get healthy, and then come back and possibly sign with the Bears, but ended up signing with the Steelers. So, yeah.
Break my heart, too. Larry's a really good player, so
Yeah.
I get it. They also let Quentin Spain walk, Riley Reif walk, Trey Hopkins walk, so significant amount of starting snaps for that offensive line year over year has been replaced, which is a good thing. This is like pure addition by subtraction in my view, because this was one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Not just in terms of losing one-on-ones, but in terms of like communication and calling protections. I did a whole film room episode on it about like the source of all their sacks, and they were really bad at communication in terms of how they picked up blitzes and everything like that. And I don't know if it was Burrow calling protections or if it was the centers calling protections, because they had a few that played center for them throughout the season. Whoever it was wasn't doing a great job, and there was almost zero communication skills in this offensive line. So not only were they not winning one-on-ones, but they weren't communicating. So I was all in favor of just gutting it, replacing anybody that they could, which they did. Vernon Hargraves also gone. He didn't play a whole lot of snaps for them, but still notable that a depth corner is gone. And then CJ Uzama got an $8 million a year deal with New York, and I think they kind of wanted to save a lot of their cash for the offensive linemen that they brought in to help Joe not die. So overall, didn't lose major talent, but there were a couple key contributors that unfortunately are no longer there.
This was a focused effort to clean out the one glaring weakness that everyone saw. I'm sure they saw it internally. Commentators saw it weekly. Fans saw it. Joe was still running for his life last year. The amount of production and the results that they were able to generate, given that offensive line and its performance, we'll just call it performance, because a good performance
That's the way to describe it.
What they put on film was rough. And if there was a quarterback of a lesser caliber than Joe Burrow there, they would have been a very bad team because of it. They would have been absolutely crippled by it. And instead, not only were they not crippled by it, they made the freaking Super Bowl with that as an existing flaw. And it was bad, and it was repeated, and it was every week, and it was multiple times. And they still made it to the Super Bowl. So this was very much about get rid of what we don't want. And when we get down to the third free agency section, the addition section, it's really short and really focused.
Well, I kind of want to do retentions and the third-party additions all at once, because I do think they kind of tell a story together. And as you alluded, not a whole lot of names in terms of third-party additions, but all of them were important. Alex Kappa, Lyle Collins, Ted Karras, they are brought in directly to replace all of the guys that they let walk, mainly because they're just all better. What I found interesting, though, and this was a point that I just saw today, was that the Bengals don't really hand out guaranteed money to anybody past the first year of a veteran contract who isn't a quarterback. And I guess them and the Packers are the only two teams that do that, which I guess makes sense because you need to have a whole lot of cash on hand to put into escrow accounts for guarantees, and the Packers don't have access to the same amount of money as, say, the Rams do, who have an owner that's worth $20 billion. And, the Brown family's not worth that kind of money either. I think they're like 500 or 600 million net worth, somewhere in that ballpark. So they don't have access to the same kind of cash that a lot of other franchises do to just throw, $100 million into escrow accounts every single offseason. And so they have a habit, along with the Packers, of first year's guaranteed, Everything after that, not. And that was a trend that I didn't even know about till today. And then I started looking at the contracts for all these offensive linemen they brought in, and it was like 1 year guaranteed salary, 1 year guaranteed salary, 1 year guaranteed salary. And I was like, oh shit, that's true. And I think that ties into the retentions at the same time. Obviously, Jesse Bates being the flagship of that on the franchise tag. And the point was made today that, and I totally agree with it, why would Jesse Bates sign a long-term extension if he's, according to team policy or team trends, however you want to phrase it, if he's only likely to get 1 year of guaranteed money anyway, which would be the same amount as if he just played on the tag 2 years in a row. So play on the tag, force them to tag you again next year if they really want to keep you. Either way, it's only going to be a year of guaranteed money. And maybe he would be one of the ones to break the trend and get multiple years of guaranteed money. But at the same time, I don't know if he would be. If that's like, if they're not even doing it for Kappa and Karras, who are guys that are directly responsible for the livelihood of their quarterback, like why would they do that for a safety? So the point was made today is like this could be Jesse Bates' last year in Cincinnati, because why would he take a deal that only has 1 year of guaranteed money? Like all the other veterans they just signed. And begs the question for me is, are we going to be back here next summer looking at another retooling of the offensive line if all these guys are theoretically only locked into the roster for 1 or maybe 2 years at most?
It's possible. And with Bates, like, the tag makes more sense because you're guaranteed a raise too. Mm-hmm. Like if you're tagged again, it goes up. It's not the same thing. You can't just say, oh, we're going to tag you for the same amount. Like getting tagged for the second year comes with a premium. So if they were willing to do it, he'd make more money. And the guarantees are the same, so you're not losing anything either way. If they weren't gonna keep you after 1 year guaranteed on a contract you signed, then they're not going to keep you after 1 year tagging you, and there's no difference. The offensive line, a little bit different to me. You want to build that continuity. You talked about it at the top. Communication, like, it's key. I think it will be better this year with the caliber of players they brought in. They can all hold their own on the left side. They replaced everything from the middle to the left tackle. And they seem pretty fired up about it. They realize the window they're stepping into in terms of where the Bengals are and that they're going to be competitive. And as long as they keep Joe Burrow upright, they're all going to have a chance at a ring. They get that. So you want to keep a unit like that together. Now, if somebody performs really poorly, it's very handy that they only have 1 year worth of guaranteed money. Yes, you can replace them. You can go out and draft a highly thought of replacement in the early rounds if you want to, or you can go sign the other top free agent if you want to. But you want to keep that group together so that they are learning as a unit as much as you can, communicating, not having all those breakdowns that we saw last year that were responsible for a lot of the broken plays, some which Joe Burrow magically turned into gains, but you don't want to force that on your quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach it differently as per position. But it's a fascinating piece, sort of a small factoid that really influences, especially in the day and age where rookies are now getting guaranteed money and top rookies are getting full guaranteed money. That's the face of that negotiation league-wide is changing. So it'll be fascinating to see if the Bengals sort of dig their heels in and say, nope, we're not doing it. Or everybody says to them, hey, we're not going to play. Even rookies are getting guaranteed money now. Get with it.
And Bengals fans, feel free to sound off in the comments and give me some added context to this. By the way, I did look it up. Mike Brown's net worth is reportedly $2.1 billion. Quote unquote, only $2.1 billion. Still roughly like 10% of some of the other owners in the league. So I think the point stands that you can't just keep throwing $100 million into escrow accounts every year like the Rams do. But I do... in terms of the scale of NFL ownership net worth, he is on the lower end of it. So I think that's probably why they don't do as much guaranteed as a lot of other teams in the league. But I do encourage Bengals fans to sound off in the comments and give some sort of added context. Like, were there any other notable non-quarterback veterans that got a whole bunch, like 3 years of guaranteed. Like, did AJ Green even get 3 years of guaranteed money? I don't know that he did. I just found out about this like right before we recorded, and I was like, huh. That's weird. And then I checked on the free agency contracts they signed this year, and that held true. And I was like, okay. If Kappa and Collins and Karras aren't even getting it, I don't know if Jesse Bates would. But either way, at a minimum, they vastly upgraded the offensive line. They were already a Super Bowl team, and they did that with a terrible offensive line. I can only imagine how good Joe Burrow is going to be when he has time to throw. So, A+ for free agency.
That's the thing, is if you look at what they did even in year one before Joe Burrow got wiped out as a true rookie, and we've talked a lot about true rookie seasons in the NFL for quarterbacks. They're generally not very good. He did enough in his first year for them to know we got our guy. Like, we need to do some things. We got to get him another receiving weapon. We got to get him a bunch of protection. We know that. They go out, the endless debate before last year's draft. Do you get him the receiver or do you get him the tackle? Receiver, tackle, receiver, tackle. They go receiver because they believe very strongly, and rightly so, as it turns out, that Jamar Chase is a game changer. So they say, nope, we're giving him the A+ number one alpha wide receiver, and he turns out to be worth every bit of that draft selection. They still persist with the offensive line issues, and he runs for his life all year through year number 2 and makes the Super Bowl. I'm going to keep saying that. Runs for his life for the entire year, gets, an upgraded receiving weapon, has a very good, maybe one of the best. We were talking about this before we recorded. One of the best young skill sets in the NFL. If you're not putting quarterback, I would say top 3 wide receivers, running back, and sure, throw the tight end in there. If you're not taking that personnel group for the Bengals and stacking it up in the, say, top 5 league-wide, you and I aren't seeing the same thing, because the quarterback's the most important piece, but you do need a primary wide receiver, and a good running back really helps. And when you look at the Bengals' skill position set, it is as good as any group in the NFL. You can debate which one is the best, fine. That's a flavor thing. They're in the running for that. Add to that, replacing 3/5 of your offensive line with 3 very good players. They made the Super Bowl without them. Now what are you going to get? There's no reason to assume that Joe Burrow is going to get worse. They put up 53 touchdowns last year and gave up 44. If you think he's not going to put up more than 53 touchdowns in Jamar Chase's second year, his first year, Burrow's first year in the NFL with a real solid offensive line protection in front of him, you're out of your mind.
Yeah. There's really, as weird as this is to say, because they're coming off a Super Bowl appearance, there's nowhere to go but up. Like, if that's the baseline of our expectations, where it's, hey, all we have time to throw is go balls off 3-step drops and just hoping Jamar comes down with it, because more often than not he is, or the T comes down with it. If that's our baseline, and now we can actually do like the 5-step drop game and the 7-step drop game, and we could do all these, long developing play action passes without Joe dying, it's a whole new world now. So I'm super excited for that. In terms of the draft, I do think that, they spent most of their firepower in the draft, again, kind of restocking on defense, because they're thinner on that side of the ball now than they are on offense. They use free agency to address offense, draft to address defense. And overall, especially looking at what they did in the secondary, I was very, very pleased with it.
They have, again, their own scale. The Bengals assess talent in a unique way in the NFL. It is unique to them. So you may look at their draft this year or previous years and go, oh, well, I would have taken somebody else at this particular spot. They have a type, and they stick to that type because, again, Duke Tobin's been there a very long time, almost a quarter century. He understands and communicates to a very small group of scouts and decision makers what it is he wants, and they bring those players back to the fold. So round 1, pick 31, they get Dax Hill, safety out of Michigan. And I say safety because Dax Hill is boy, he's in everything. He's a nickel. He's a star. He's a safety. One of the most versatile secondary players in this draft. Great pick up top, and eventually, not even eventually, this year will be paired with Jesse Bates in certain situations, probably again as a nickel, somebody that's going to be on the field. Very impactful playmaker around the line of scrimmage, great in the passing game, super quick, tough, just brings a lot. So excellent pick for them at the bottom of round 1. Some teams have a knack for picking at the bottom of round 1. Patriots have done pretty well there over the years. KC certainly has done a decent job of that. It's the first time for Bengals picking in the bottom of the round in a while. They did great. Round 2, pick 60. They go for Cam Taylor-Britt, the big corner out of Nebraska. Interesting choice. A player I would have taken a bit later. Very skilled player, but again, fits their type. This is a franchise that employed Trey Waynes, that, they have a type. It's similar. Cam Taylor-Britt fits it. He is really aggressive, loves to hit. I'm sure they love that about him. It'll be interesting to see how and when he gets playing time in their secondary. Round 3, pick 95, Zach Carter, the defensive tackle out of Florida, who I don't know about you, I wanted to love Zach Carter a lot more. I looked at Zach Carter's body type, and I thought, man, played at Florida. This he's just got superstar written all over him. He's got all kinds of potential. He's got length, and man, look at how
wasn't
big
even the best
is.
player on his own front, not going to lie.
No, and his tape didn't quite get there, but there is something to unlock there that I don't think has been fully unlocked yet. Talk about why that is. Not really sure. Fascinated to see how he fits in to the Bengals rotation and if he can unlock some more of that, because physically, this is a dominating guy. He is big and tall, long, strong, fast. Production didn't really measure up to that. It'll be really cool to see how Cincinnati develops him. Again, a little bit earlier than I would have picked a guy like Zach Carter, but the Bengals don't care. They're going to take their guys in their spots, and they hold true to that every year. Round 4, one of my favorite picks they made, pick 136, Cordell Volson, the offensive tackle out of North Dakota State. We saw him at the Shrine Bowl. I said to you at that point, this is a guy that's going to get drafted low, play 5 or 6 years, end up signing a big third contract to go somewhere, be super reliable part of an offensive line. Everybody's going to go, where did he play again? Like, he's just that guy. They pick him 4th round. He's got great versatility. He can play tackle or guard for them. They relied pretty heavily on their Shrine Bowl scouting too, because we're going to get to another one. But Cordell Volson, the 4th round, I think will pay early dividends for a team that needed offensive line help. Is he going to start? No, he doesn't need to. They went out and addressed that in free agency. Is he going to contribute early and often because of that versatility? I think he can. Round 5, pick 166. Tyson Anderson, the safety from Toledo, who is an absolute missile, gets to go learn under Jesse Bates. I think he's going to push for playing time sooner than a lot of people may think he does, based on his draft position, pedigree, where he played in college, all that stuff. They may tend to overlook him. Don't. He is a really good player. He's super fast. Good going forwards and backwards. He is not just a hitter in the box. Very, very gifted. I think he'll play pretty quickly in the secondary. Last pick, round 7, 252. Jeffrey Gunter, the defensive end / edge from Coastal Carolina, another Shrine Bowl player we got to see up close. I'm impressed with him. He's got more physical gifts. The only reason he was available in round 7 is because this was a huge draft class with a lot of edge prospects. Normally a guy with Jeffrey Gunter's physical profile and production profile in college going no later than the 4th or 5th round. This year he lasted to the 7th, and the Bengals are the beneficiaries.
When I look at this draft, I think it just gives me even more, I don't want to say confidence. I would say doubt that Jesse Bates is in the long-term plans, because as of recording this, this is before the free agency deadline on Friday. This is a Wednesday. So maybe something happens before that deadline, but I mean, Rappaport just tweeted out a few hours ago that it's unlikely. And just, taking in the gap between the franchise tag number and Minka's number at the top of the market at 18 million. Like, the franchise tag is 66% of what the top of the market is right now. So the Bengals, have no incentive to give him a ton of money, because even the raise on the franchise tag next year is still going to be $3 million under top of market. Not to mention, they just drafted 2 guys. And so there's writing on the wall that they love Jesse as a player, and Jesse's a great safety. The way they drafted here makes me think that they're the replacement, not the complement. And, Dax Hill can play safety. He can play nickel for them. He's a phenomenal player. Whether or not he's going to play over Mike Hilton in the slot, I would lean towards no. And I would probably think like Dax would be either the third safety, or, God forbid Bell or Bates go down, he can slide in and start and be totally fine. But I think he's more of a 2023 pick than a 2022 pick. Same thing for Tyson Anderson. He'll make his money on special teams early, but I think he's more of a 2023, 2024 type pick than a 2022 pick. They don't need safety right now, but I think the only reason why they took a safety when they don't need one right now is because they're about to. So that's how I kind of interpreted that pick. Cam Taylor-Britt, I'm right there with you. I thought that was a great pick for them at corner on day 2, where I still do think they need help at outside corner. Eli Apple was fine-ish, but nothing more than fine-ish. And I would like to see Cam Taylor-Britt give him some competition in camp for that starting spot, because I do think he could push him for that. Zach Carter, again, I thought that was a little bit of a reach. I'm right there with you. I was not as impressed with him as I was hoping for from a defensive lineman from Florida, and my eye kept routinely going to no fewer than 3 other guys on that front every time I tried to watch him. So it was a little on that pick, but I love the Volson pick in round 4. Very athletic tackle prospect. Just keep stacking depth. Keep stacking it over and over and over again. And hey, worst case scenario, if he's pushing Jonah for a starting spot sooner rather than later. I mean, Jonah gave up 10 sacks last year. It's not like he's completely secure as a starter either. And I think Volson does have starting talent, just not starting polish at the moment. And as you mentioned, Jeffrey Gunter, again, he doesn't need to be on the field right now, because Hendrickson and Hubbard are a really good duo. And they got some other guys that I really, really were fans of coming out. Khaled Kareem, you and I both loved him so much coming out. And Gunter is just another one of these guys in the second and third wave. And you're getting him in the 7th round, which is a great, great value for him. That was 2 rounds later than I thought he would go. So overall, very enthusiastic about the draft, other than the Carter pick, which I felt was pretty early for him. But I think they insulated themselves from having a hole at safety if and when Bates moves on, which, again, if it was me, if I was running the team, Bates would not move on. I would extend him, but I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves here. They insulated themselves from having a hole at safety. They improved their depth on the offensive and defensive lines. I'm totally good with it. I thought it was a fantastic job. Looking at UDFAs, I also thought they got some good values there. In particular, again, yet another wave 2 or wave 3 edge guy that I think has a pretty decent chance to make the roster, in Carson Wells.
Yeah, again, they leaned heavily on the Shrine Bowl, and man, do they love Coastal Carolina. The Bengals love Coastal Carolina.
They do, don't they?
They drafted one guy from Coastal Carolina, and they picked up 2 others who were quality playmakers, and one of them was a Shrine Bowl guy, and I'm really surprised he didn't get drafted, and that's Javon Hiley, the wide receiver. He's underrated. There isn't any other way to say it. He's not super flashy. He is super effective, and he will play in the NFL. Whether or not it's for the Bengals, I'm shocked he wasn't drafted in the 5th, in the 6th, in the 7th. He should have been drafted maybe even a little bit before that. The fact he went undrafted is ridiculous. The other guy that they get is a guy that I pinged you about in the middle of the night, as is wont to happen in draft season. And that's the running back, Shamari Jones, also from Coastal Carolina. And I sent you one particular clip from all 22, and I was like, look at this. Like, you're telling me that guy's not going to get drafted? Well, turns out he didn't get drafted, but he ends up in Cincinnati. Shamari Jones, really big back with great feet, good speed, runs more between the tackles than he does outside, but he's nifty. If you just look at him, you might think he's a hammer. He's more than that. He had some great runs at Coastal Carolina. So their staff is really well linked with the Coastal Carolina program for one reason or another. But they pull 3 good players with Gunter, Jones, and Haile out of that program. 2 of them basically for free. Justin Rigg, the tight end out of Kentucky, Big Rig. I want to talk about him. He was another guy he's another guy that I sent to our buddy Brad Spielberger in the middle of the night when I was scouting Kentucky offensive talent and actually Georgia defensive talent. I was looking at Kentucky versus Georgia, and Riggs had a couple plays, three plays out of a 4-play series in between the 20s. Very large target. He's 6'6", 6'7", something like that. And he's not super mobile, but he's good in a short area. And lots of people were talking about other tight ends in this draft that had a similar profile. Nobody was talking about Riggs. And I was like, he's going to end up in a camp. Guarantee it. Put this guy on your list. Nobody's talking about him. Cincinnati saw the same thing, and he ends up on their roster. Ben Brown, interior offensive lineman from Mississippi, played some guard, some center. I think, again, like Volson, like if you told me that 3 years from now the Bengals interior guard tandem was Volson and Ben Brown, I'd be like, sounds about right.
Yeah.
They'd be no dollars, pretty effective, depending on who was around him. Great pickup for no money. Ben Brown didn't test super well, so it's one of the reasons he ended up there. But if you're going to skip on testing numbers, interior offensive lineman is one place where savvy, leverage, know-how, and just want to matters a little bit more than tape and time. So Carson Wells, last player in the list, first one you mentioned, the edge out of Colorado, showed some pop at the Shrine Bowl, showed some explosion, showed some versatility, ability to rush from different stances, different sides. A great pickup to sit, again, in that wave structure with Jeffrey Gunter and all the other guys behind their established starters and see if you got anything. If not, he's got great size for special teams. He is not slow. He's really aggressive. He'll work there. But I actually think he's got some upside as a situational rusher. So if you can grab that in UDFA, pure win.
In particular, I think the main 2 that I'm excited about are Shamari Jones and Carson Wells. Shamari, at absolute peak, watching him gave me some Devonta Freeman vibes. I want to stress, I'm not saying he's Devonta Freeman. If he was, he would have been drafted. But I think a lot of the highlights that you saw at Coastal Carolina, the cuts, the shiftiness, the contact balance, it did give me Devonta Freeman vibes. And I, too, was surprised that he at least didn't have a 7th-round pick thrown at him just to see what he's got. So that was a great move by the Bengals to pick him up, because even though they do have a whole bunch of running backs, they got Joe Mixon, they got Samaje Perine, they got Chris Evans, who came out of nowhere last year and was really good for them. They even have Travion Williams, who I still believe there's something there. Shamari Jones, I thought has a decent shot of making the roster, even in that backfield. He kind of gives them a little bit of something that they don't already have. And then Carson Wells, I also think, has a somewhat decent shot of making the roster. He's going to have to compete with Khaled Kareem and Wyatt Hubert and Jeff Gunter, but I think that he's kind of in a similar vein or a similar grade overall to Gunter and Hubert. Kareem, I liked a little bit more coming out than those 3, but I think he could make it as a 6th edge rusher, so that's borderline on the roster, maybe on the practice squad, and if somebody gets hurt, they call him up. But I think that he will be there for them in some capacity. The question is he going to be the 5th edge, or is he going to be a practice squad guy? But I do like him a lot. He was productive in the Pac-12, has really good hands, not super explosive, but I think he's got some bend, and I think he corners well, which is just as much about technique as it is about hip flexibility. So I like him a lot. I think he's got a shot. In terms of overall team floor, team ceiling, this is our last segment and the one that we close out every episode with. This is ceiling in wins and and floor in wins. What are the high highs and what are the low lows that we can expect? The range of outcomes that we can expect for the Bengals. I put them in the same tier that I did for the Bills, 2 weeks ago at this point. And that is 13 wins as a ceiling, which is, first seed in the AFC, or at least fighting for the first seed in the AFC, potentially hosting the playoffs all the way to the Super Bowl, as an absolute floor. And it would take an injury to Burrow, or it would take some sort of apocalyptic, injury run to their receiving core. I have them at 9 as a floor. But I think going back a couple years ago, if you told Bengals fans that we were projecting their floor at 9 wins when they took Joe Burrow, they would be ecstatic, because for a while for this franchise, 9 wins was considered a great season. So a 9-win floor, but potentially a 13-win ceiling with first seed in the AFC and going right back to the Super Bowl, I think Bengals fans would be stoked with that. And there's very few teams, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL at large, that I would even feel comfortable favoring against the Bengals. There's maybe 3 of them at most.
I ended up in the exact same place. 13 wins was my ceiling because they won 10 last year with an absolutely porous offensive line. They threw enough at the offensive line to fix it. And even if they have one injury, the line is still going to be worlds better than what they fielded last year. And what they fielded last year, I'm going to keep saying it, went to the Super Bowl. So there is no reason to predict regression when the only major flaw, and they didn't lose anybody either. That offensive core is extremely young. They still have all 3 wide receivers. They still have their top-tier running back. They still have their all-world quarterback. Yeah, they lost Uzama. They brought in Hayden Hurst, who is more than capable at the same level. Is he an improvement? I don't think so. Is he a fall-off from Uzama? I really don't think so at all. I think they're very similar. So they didn't literally lose anything on offense, and they buttressed the offensive line. They're going to win a bunch of games. 13's my ceiling. I said an 8-win floor, thinking more about worst-case scenario, injuries to the offensive line, having to rely on depth, injury to Burrow. He misses some time. I still think that's a pretty darn good floor, because you're going to have a decent offensive line. You got Mixon. You can fall back on that if you have to switch quarterbacks for a few games. Probably still grind out half the wins. This is a really talented team. It's a talented roster, and it's a talented team, and those are 2 different things. We've seen plenty of talented rosters that were not good teams. This team exceeded their expectations last year. That is the sign of a good team. That is the sign of a team that can come together when it matters down the stretch and win games that maybe they quote-unquote shouldn't. They certainly weren't favored against Kansas City. They managed to get it done. Was it super clean? No. Did they get it done? They did. So I can't see any real fall off for them. I can see an improvement pretty clearly and easily. There aren't many teams I feel really comfortable just tacking 13 wins on. That is a lot of wins in the NFL, and every win is hard to come by. This one, as long as Joe Burrow's upright, and he has every reason to be this year, I think 13 wins is completely reasonable as a ceiling.
You mentioned they weren't favored against Kansas City. I think they would be favored against Kansas City right now, and I would favor them against Kansas City right now, today, if they had to play. I mentioned that there's maybe 3 teams that I wouldn't favor them against, and like I said, it's a short list. It's the Rams, because as far as I'm concerned, somebody's got to beat them, and until somebody beats them, they're my top team right now. Buffalo, because they're Buffalo, and Tampa, because Tom Brady's amazing and there's an incredible roster there. Other than that, I'm taking Cincy in every single matchup in the league. Every single one. I don't care if it's Baltimore. I don't care if it's Kansas City, Indianapolis, Philly. Throw any AFC West team there. I'm taking Cincy right now, today, based on what we know. And I think that that's perfectly justifiable. And there's going to be a lot of AFC West fans that are like, but, we got this, we got this, we got that. It's like, I get it. Again, coming off a Super Bowl, Joe Burrow, elite quarterback, shitty offensive line last year, better offensive line this year. They got
everything else the same.
Everything else the same. There's no reason for me to think that this is not a top 4 to 5 team in the NFL. No reason. And we'll see how the season plays out because obviously things can change. There's been a lot of moving parts. We're literally going over every single team in the league and trying to project them all. But based on what we know now, this is one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the league, inarguably, and they have a shot. They have a legit shot. And I think Bengals fans should be happy about that.
I think they're going to be thrilled, and not only this year, but for a long time. Duke Tobin has shown the ability to build a roster, and they have what every franchise in the NFL wants, which is a young and very capable, dangerous signal caller that if you get him into the playoffs, you have a shot every year. That is as big a window as you get in the NFL, and that window is a reality right now in Cincy. They saw that last year. They got the sort of bonus early Super Bowl trip, and now it's going to become the expectation. That gets tough in a whole different way, but if
Seattle all over again. They went to the Super Bowl right immediately, and then every single year after that, it's like, well, why aren't you going again? It's like, well, it's fucking hard.
Super Bowl or bust. But if there was any quarterback in the NFL mentally that can handle that as a young quarterback, it's Burrow. So not just like I said last year, not going to bet against Joe Burrow. I said I wouldn't when he came out of college, and I'm not going to start now.
Well, with that being said, we have one more day to go on AFC North week. Tomorrow is the macro look at the division. We're picking MVP of the AFC North, offensive, defensive player of the year, rookie of the year, coach of the year, all that kind of stuff. Again, taking a more macro approach rather than team-by-team breakdowns. So if you're a Bengals fan, come back tomorrow for that because I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot about Cincinnati once again. And then after that, we're moving on to the NFC North, and then we're heading out west to finish this series off. If you're just joining us, we have more episodes than I even thought possible leading up to this one out already. So if you want to catch up on what every single team in the league has been doing, and of course all the other competition that Cincy's going to have to go through in the AFC, because there's a lot of it, you can go back and watch those. It'll give you some nice entertainment leading up to the start of training camp and preseason. But we'll be back here, same time, same place tomorrow. And until then, later.
Take care.